All right, 20 minutes before the hour. Joining us now, a brother whom I have a great deal of regard for. He wrote a book about my favorite athlete of all time and my favorite sports figure of all time, the great Hank Aaron, who actually is made a statement about this book. Um, he said, "It may make people uncomfortable, but I'm pleased that Howard Bryant has chosen to tell the story of our heritage, and even more pleased that there are still ball players today who are willing to stand up to what they willing to stand up for what they think is right." Joining us now, his new book, The Heritage: Black Athletes That Divided America and the Politics of Patriotism. Howard Bryant joins us now. My brother, how are you, man?
I'm fine. Good morning. How you doing?
Just fine, man. Good morning to you. We last saw each other at the Jackie Robinson Foundation then, and I told you then we're going to get you on the show. Of course, Howard also writes for ESPN .com. So, Howard, how much did what happened most recently with Colin Kaepernick inspire this book?
It didn't, not at all. Um, the the real inspiration for this book was Ferguson.
Hmm.
I think it was sort of an accumulation. It was a bunch of incidences that happened and then happened and then happened. You've got Ferguson, and then you've got Eric Garner, then you've got Tamir Rice, and then Sandra Bland, and these things just continue to happen. And in addition to them happening, you're also looking at what happens, what's happening to sports. What is the game looking like? It really was a combination of two things. It was Ferguson, and at the same time, it's been me paying really close attention to how sports are being packaged, marketing, and sold since 9/11. And you notice, if you're of a certain generation, and you do not notice if you're not from that generation, how much the game has shifted toward authority symbols, patriotism, jingoism, nationalism. And when those two things collide, you've got a sporting universe that's nothing like we've seen before. It used to be that when you went to a sporting event, the teams themselves did not want it to be very political. The players did what they wanted to do, but you didn't have all of these symbols that you have now. And I think it has really ramped up. And then, of course, when you add Colin to it, and then you add Donald Trump to it, and you add all of those things, sports doesn't look anything like it used to.
But that's interesting you say, because there are those who would say actually that what Colin has done and what LeBron and others did, wearing the shirts "I Can't Breathe, Black Lives Matter," that they were being political. But you're actually making the case that so many other parts of the game that we take as subtle are political, with the flag, the patriotism, Trump, and all that. That's a political statement in and of itself, isn't it?
No question. No question. The most fascinating thing to me about this entire story is how quick people are to recognize the political elements of a Colin Kaepernick or a Dwayne Wade wearing a hoodie for Trayvon Martin,
Mm-hmm,
or the players taking a knee, or LeBron James making a political statement, while not recognizing the fact that the American flag has become the ultimate product placement on sports.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's an American flag everywhere, and this is a byproduct of 9/11. 9/11 cannot be underestimated, and one of the things that I always worry about when we talk about these stories is that you cannot talk about sports today without looking at the effects of 9/11 on the game.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is where the police are suddenly on the field, and we have law enforcement appreciation nights in every ballpark in the country, in every sport. And you
Right.
start asking yourself, how does the black player reconcile law enforcement appreciation night when they're coming back from Freddie Gray's funeral?
Yeah,
When
yeah.
Carmelo Anthony is in West Baltimore walking arm in arm with the people, then he goes to work and is expected to genuflect toward the same law enforcement that was unaccountable with Eric Garner and Freddie Gray and Sandra Bland and the rest of them.
And for that matter, Howard Bryant, how does the black fan
And how
reconcile
does a
that?
black fan reconcile with that?
But
And on
but
top of,
but the
hmm
question is how many? That's part of the problem too. How many black fans are left who actually are able to attend these games also?
well, that's right. And I think that this is what it looks like. So when I started to think about what this project was going to be, it took a lot of time to figure out what it was. It's like,
Right.
okay, I know something is happening. What is happening?
Mm-hmm.
The game, and I think what started to really shift my mind was you started to see these two elements colliding with each other. You had post 9/11 sports selling patriotism, selling nationalism, selling the military, selling cops. At the same time, you had the post Ferguson black athlete protesting the
Mm-hmm.
police and having to be very, very clear that they weren't protesting the military, even though it's okay to criticize the military if you're not comfortable with what's happening in the world, but it just shows you how political the sport itself has become.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was very interesting to me in doing the research was this split, this dichotomy that this negotiation that people made in their own minds, which was it was political when Colin Kaepernick talked about police shootings, but having the military on the field when you're fighting two wars is not political at all. It's patriotism. And I'm like, what's the difference?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But people do make the distinction. They very much do make the distinction between politics and patriotism. And that puts the black athlete in a really interesting place.
Howard Bryant, the author of the new book, The Heritage, Black Athletes, A Divided America and the Politics of Patriotism. Ladies and gentlemen, your calls, 866-99-SERIOUS, 866-997-4748. And, of course, we're streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Make it plain. You described something in the 1970s called the greenwashing of black athletes. Many have heard the term whitewashing, but tell us about greenwashing, if you would, Howard.
Well, I think that we continue to try to negotiate how to fit in. How do we make it? How do we get where we're trying to go?
Mm-hmm.
And you can hear it in the language when people say, "Oh, I don't see." How many times have we heard as black people, "Oh, when I talk to you, I don't see race," or they talk about being colorblind. But all of these different conversations are other ways of trying to, in my opinion, avoid the racial component that we all have as people. And with the players, what you found was that the more money the player made, the more expectation they had to avoid racial issues.
Mm-hmm.
The more green you gave them, the less black they became.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the less black the expectation. And what was really interesting about it to me is the money is actually something that is supposed to empower your voice. In every other element of society, the more money you have, the more we listen to you. We listen to the rich. We listen to the celebrities. We listen to the famous. If you have money, you can become president.
Right.
But when it came to the black athlete, the more money they had, the more of their blackness we didn't want, especially as the white public and even the black public sports fans. The more money you had, well, you're making all that money. Why are you talking about racial issues?
Yeah.
Whereas in every other element, the more money you had, the more you got to be yourself.
Yeah.
So the Michael Jordans of the world, especially, or the O.J. Simpsons of the world, and the Tiger Woodses of the world, they created a new template coming out of the 1960s, whereas you had Ali was the last athlete who was number one in the country, the last black athlete who was the guy, the LeBron James of his time, who was willing to tie his blackness to his public identity. After Ali, that was it. Suddenly, the worst thing in the world you could be was to be unapologetically black. And that was tied directly to the money. The more money you made, people thought that meant that you had no right to talk about issues that affected the black community and affected your people. And that's why LeBron showing up with Trayvon and the Miami Heat doing their thing, that's why it was such a shock in 2012. It was like, wait a minute, they're awake.
Yeah.
They've been gone for a long time.
Right.
Now they're
deal.
back.
That's a big deal. The You mentioned O.J. Howard Bryant with his folks, his book, The Heritage. Your calls, 866-99-SERIES, 866-997-4748. You mentioned O.J., and that's part of the irony in terms of dealing with O.J., because he was so greenwashed and, frankly, whitewashed to a large extent. He was the opposite of Muhammad Ali. When the deal went down, when the slayings went down, I know you'll remember this. Most black folk weren't with O.J.
Nope.
Most black folk weren't. They didn't care about O.J.
No,
But
about the justice system.
yeah, but I mean, it flipped. You had white people holding up signs on the freeway, "Run, O.J., run." By the end of that trial, it completely flipped because we saw the true racism in the system. Black people came back to defend O.J., and whites who had originally loved him for being so green and whitewashed turned on him. I mean, it showed kind of the way the whole thing flipped around.
No question. And I think what's very interesting about OJ as an athlete, and I really tried to. I mean, OJ's so complicated. I was like, if I get too deep into this, he's going to devour my whole book.
Yeah, really, he's a book. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. So I didn't deal with OJ Part 2. I simply dealt with OJ. Everyone knows
Right.
OJ Part 2.
Yeah.
OJ Part 1 was he was the first black athlete to essentially be integrated into the white world.
Yeah.
In 1967, when the Boston Red Sox and the St. Louis Cardinals played in the World Series, Bob Gibson was the MVP. Beat the Red Sox in 7 games. No endorsements.
Wow.
Nothing.
Got
Got the Chevrolet, but got no endorsements. And so the black athlete never started to see what was possible financially until OJ. And OJ opened up those doors. OJ was the first guy to get that big national marketing contract with Hertz, obviously, and then all the other stuff he got. OJ was the first one to start moving in to the black communities without having the neighborhood petition to not have him move in, like with Hank Aaron and Willie Mays.
Right.
OJ was the guy who showed what was possible. And then when you start getting into the mid-1970s, that was when the free agent money started. So you got Kareem making $1 million. You got Dave Winfield and Reggie and all these. Now the big money's there. And I think people started to look at the country and say, okay, well, we don't have Jim Crow anymore. We don't need the black athlete to get involved. There's no reason to be in the streets anyway. And that started to move the black player away from his heritage, away from the Jackie Robinsons and the Robisons and the Alis and the Bill Russells, to something far more corporate. And they didn't come back until Trayvon and LeBron.
Yeah, and about time, the heritage, black athletes that divided America, and the politics of patriotism with Howard Bryant. So I actually had a discussion last week with another scholar about Jack Johnson. And you mentioned Trump's role in the sports world now, and this allegiance to him and his patriotism, which is as political, folks, if not more political. Sylvester Stallone reaches out to Trump. He says he might pardon Jack Johnson. What's your reaction to that whole? I don't think he's really going to do it, Howard. But what are your thoughts about that, and how again that complicates things and kind of requires some very real analysis?
Well, my feeling is that anything that comes out of the White House is to be, I wouldn't say immediately dismissed because of the power of the office, but it's unpredictable. And it certainly is very rarely rooted in any scholarship. It's not rooted in anything that makes you feel like, okay, there's a passion here. It's just something else to sort of throw against the wall.
Yeah.
I don't get the feeling that there's a great deal of uniqueness to it. Ken Burns and a lot of writers for years have been trying to rehabilitate Jack Johnson. And so I took what they'd done way more seriously than what I'm hearing from the White House now.
Right. Indeed.
And I think that dovetails nicely into this supposed racial summit. You can see that the president is trying to create with these black celebrities, with Kanye, and then supposedly inviting Colin Kaepernick to it as well, and all of this, which is, it's all nonsense. It's celebrity class stuff. where you're not willing to engage with the people who know what they're talking about, the people who are engaged in policy. It's all just one big TV show. So
Yeah.
I can't say
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time on it.
Sure, sure. Well, folks, we appreciate the time Howard has spent with us and spent on this book as well, The Heritage, Black Athletes, A Divided America, and the Politics of Patriotism. I like the cover, too, a helmet with a black power fist on it. My brother, great work, and honestly, a lot of these brothers who are athletes, unlike Kanye, need to do some reading. One of the places they can begin to read is with your book. Much more reading necessary for this generation, lest they do say the kind of stuff that Kanye's been saying. Howard, always a pleasure, man, and keep up the great work. You're a great writer. As I said, I have a great deal of respect for you. And congratulations on the book, my brother, okay?
No, Mark, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll talk again soon, hopefully, all right?
All right, now.
Take care, all right. The Heritage by Howard Bryant. Okay, we're going to get ready to take a break. Folks, we'll be back. Sirius XM Progress 127 Resistance Radio. We'll get ready for impeachment. This is MIP.